Last time on Australia Rediscovered with Ricko.
In 1828, a bloke you probably have heard of, Captain Charles Sturt, well, he was given the job of charting the river and finding the outer limits of the colony.
Sturt's party of Hume, 3 soldiers and 10 convicts left Sydney on the 10th of November and reached the limits of the Macquarie Marshes by the end of December. On February 2nd, the reunited party suddenly came upon a large river flowing west. Sturt named it the Darling River.
You know, I don't think you can overstate the importance of this particular spot right here, because this not only marks the end of Sturt's Murrumbidgee adventure, but also his discovery of Australia's greatest river, the Murray.
But along with those discoveries, Sturt also faced severe hardship, mortal danger, starvation, thirst, and ultimately tragedy. Australia. A land of extremes. And the stories of those who discovered the secrets of the Australian continent and made this land great are worth telling. So join me as I recount and retrace the footsteps of Australia's greatest stories. On Australia Rediscovered with Ricko.
Winterland, tell me all your secrets. Fill me in on your wildest moments.
By 1844, our old mate Sturt, he had a couple of pretty significant expeditions under his belt. He'd mapped out those northern New South Wales rivers. He'd of course discovered the Murray, he touched on the Darling, and of course he'd been down the Murrumbidgee as well. But also in 1844 he found himself in trouble back at home in Adelaide. He was out of cash and he'd stood on a few toes of the wrong people. The only way to get himself out of a trouble, he thought, was to go and do another great big expedition. This time he left Adelaide in August 1844 with his crew and all of his stock, and he made his way here to the confluence of the Murray and the Darling. He was trucking north because he was convinced that there was still an inland sea to be discovered, and he was going to be the man to do it. So that's where we're going.
When you head for your trip, right out of this wicked black and into bright sand, straight towards the warm sun and into his hands.
Sturt had arrived in Adelaide in February of 1839 with his wife Charlotte, whom he'd married while in England while recuperating from his eyesight issues, and his 2 sons, Napier and Charles, after financial issues had caused him to sell his several land holdings south of Sydney. Once in Adelaide, Sturt was offered the position of Surveyor General of South Australia by Governor George Gawler. But through a series of decisions by both Gawler and the Colonial Office in London, Sturt was shifted around in various government roles until Gawler was recalled to England due to financial irregularities in the colony's government, and Captain George Grey was installed as the new Governor of South Australia, a situation that angered Sturt. Upon hearing of Grey's appointment, Sturt wrote a letter to the Colonial Office insisting that Grey's appointment was ill-advised and that he himself would have been the better choice.
I take the liberty of candidly stating my feeling that if an individual of ordinary rank is to fill this post, no one has greater claims than myself. The appointment of Captain Grey, an officer much my junior in years and of less experience, would place me as subordinate to him in a situation which I could not but feel embarrassing and humiliating.
Grey was informed of Sturt's letter, and for some time the relationship between Sturt and Grey was strained. During this turbulent time, Sturt began to realise that the only way that he could gain the notoriety and position that he desired was to embark on another expedition into the interior to finally establish the presence of an inland sea. In 1843, Sturt wrote to the Colonial Office asking for permission to form an exploration party to explore the entire unknown interior. In May 1844, the Secretary of State rejected Sturt's original plan, but approved a more limited proposal to head into the centre of the continent to establish the existence of a mountain range near latitude 28 degrees south. On August the 10th, 1844, Sturt left Adelaide with 15 men, 6 drays, a whale boat and 200 sheep. Sturt had assembled a top-notch team for this expedition into the interior. He had chosen, as his assistant, James Poole, a fiery Irishman and surveyor, whose fate would be sealed in the heat of the rugged desert. John Brown was to be the expedition surgeon, and John McDouall Stewart, who would later find fame as an explorer in his own right, was engaged as the expedition's draftsman. With the colony behind them and the unknown ahead, none of the men knew what lay before them. And none of the men had any idea of the tragic price of their journey.